Let's see if our custodian can handle this one. The words weren't whispered. They were launched across the classroom like a challenge wrapped in a smirk. Every student in room 214 turned. Chalk dust hung in the air, sunlight cutting through it in thin, accusing beams. And at the front of the room stood Mr. Brian Harkins, plaid tie crooked, ego intact, grinning like he'd just discovered entertainment for his last period class. Near, the doorway, mop handle resting against the wall. Leon Graves froze. He wasn't supposed to be here for anything but a spill cleanup, yet somehow a simple task had turned into spectacle. "Come on, Mr. Graves," Harkins said, gesturing toward the whiteboard. "You walk by my classroom every day. You always stare at these equations like they're old friends. You ever take a math class?" A few students laughed under their breath. Someone whispered, "This is gonna be good." Leon's eyes moved, slowly from the board to the man. "Just here to do my job, sir." "Oh, I insist," Harkins pressed, voice dripping with mock courtesy. "We're working on limits and derivatives. Basic calculus Y. Let's see what you've got." He tapped the marker against the board. F, X, 3I3, 5, 2 plus 2X, 7, then drew a long line under it. Find F, X. Jordan Ellis, the quiet, honor roll senior sitting near the window, lowered his phone. Something about the teacher's tone didn't sit right. Leon, in his Navy work shirt and maintenance badge, looked out of place only to people who didn't know better. His calm wasn't submission, it was calculation. "I don't think," Leon started. "Oh, it's easy," Harkins cut in. "Just tell us what the derivative is. We'll help you if you get stuck." Laughter again, sharper this time. Leon's mop water glimmered in the bucket beside him, still and waiting. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Leon walked forward. Each step sounded like a decision. He reached the board. The marker squeaked in his hand, steady, practiced. He wrote, "Ours X, we're at 9-2, 10X, plus 2, no hesitation, no glance back, just clean motion." A hush fell. Harkins blinked. "Well, lucky guess," he said too quickly. "Anyone can memorize patterns." Leon turned slightly. "Then maybe you'd like another example." Something in the room shifted. The students leaned forward. Harkins crossed his arms, bluffing. "Fine. Do an integral. Show us you didn't just memorize something from YouTube." He scribbled a new problem. Leon didn't even sit. He solved. It's step by step, precise, efficient. When he finished, he placed the marker on the ledge and quietly said, "That's your antiderivative. Don't forget the constant C, silence, the kind that eats confidence alive." Jordan's phone camera was already rolling now, not out of mockery but awe. The custodian who wiped desks after hours had just done a calculus problem faster than the teacher who assigned it. Harkins forced a smile. "Maybe you looked at that earlier." "No," Leon replied evenly. "I learned it about 20 years ago." Students exchanged glances. Harkins felt the heat crawl up his neck. He reached for sarcasm like a drowning man for driftwood. "Oh, right, you're secretly Einstein with a mop. What did you do, major in math at Harvard, before realizing janitorial work was your true calling?" A couple of kids snickered nervous laughter. Not real amusement. Leon met his eyes, unflinching. "Georgia Tech, class of 2001. I didn't graduate." That line landed like a stone dropped in still water. The ripples reached everyone. Jordan lowered his phone slowly. "Wait, you actually went there?" Leon nodded once. "Night program. I had a scholarship till my mom got sick." Harkins tried to recover. "All right, folks, show's over. Back to work." But the energy in the room had changed. It wasn't his anymore. Tyler Nash muttered, "Dude just smoked you," earning a glare that could freeze air. Leon picked up his mop bucket. "You got what you wanted, sir. I'll get back to cleaning." "Hold on." Harkins stepped in front of him. "You think you're better than the people who actually earned their degrees?" "No," Leon said quietly. "I just don't think a degree decides who understands something." That sentence hit harder than the equations on the board. Several students clapped awkward, spontaneous, half-nervous. Harkins barked, "Enough." The bell rang like divine timing, saving him from further unraveling. Leon wheeled his bucket out, eyes down but posture straight. Jordan slipped into the hall after him. "Mr. Graves," he called. "Can I ask you something? How'd you do that so fast?" Leon smiled faintly. "Numbers are like people, Jordan. You listen long enough, they tell you what they need." Jordan blinked. "That was, cool. You know this is already on TikTok, right?" Leon frowned. "On what?" "Never mind," Jordan said, grinning. "Just be ready." By the time Leon finished his shift that evening, the clip had spread across every social platform the students used. A man in a janitor's uniform solving calculus under pressure, humble, calm, brilliant. Caption: "When the janitor outsmarts the math teacher." The comments poured in. "Legend. This needs to go viral. Someone hire him to teach." But Leon didn't see any of it yet. He was driving his old Chevy pickup through the quiet streets of Grayfield, headlights cutting, through mist, classical jazz humming low. His mind wasn't on the video. It was on the memory of a hospital room 15 years earlier and the promise he'd made to his dying mother to stay humble, to stay kind, to never prove people wrong, just to feel right. He thought he'd buried that lesson beneath years of mopping floors. But that classroom had unearthed it again. At school, Harkins stayed late, pacing the empty room. He'd thought the day would end in laughter, maybe applause. Instead, he felt mocked. He opened his laptop, typed Leon Graves into the district. Directory nothing but custodial maintenance. No degree, no note of special training, he muttered. Let's see how long he lasts here. By morning, everyone had seen the clip. Students greeted Leon in the halls with nods of respect. Some asked him to help with homework. Teachers whispered near the copier. The principal, Elaine Porter, called him into her office. "Leon," she began, cautious but curious. "I saw a video of you in Mr. Harkins's class. It's impressive." He shifted uncomfortably. "Wasn't trying to show off, ma'am." "I believe you," she said. "But the school board's already asking questions. They want to know why a custodian can teach calculus when we're short on qualified tutors." Leon smiled faintly. "Because math doesn't care about job titles." Elaine studied him, seeing something she hadn't noticed before. Quiet authority. "Well," she said finally, "for what it's worth, you handled yourself better than most teachers would. Thank you, ma'am. I just don't want trouble." But trouble was already brewing. Mr. Harkins had his own story. He told colleagues Leon had embarrassed him on purpose, that the video made the school look bad, that the janitor had hacked his lesson plan somehow. Rumors multiplied faster than equations on a whiteboard. By lunch, half the staff thought Leon had a criminal record. The other half thought he was a secret genius. Both were wrong and both were dangerous. That afternoon, as Leon mopped the science wing, Vice Principal Calvin Reed approached him quietly. "Leon," he said, "ignore the noise. Some folks get nervous when the ground shifts under their feet." Leon nodded. "I've seen that before." Calvin hesitated. "You really studied math that deep?" "Yeah," Leon said softly. "Back when life was simpler and money was short." Calvin smiled. "Maybe it's about to get interesting again." Outside, clouds gathered. A storm rolled in, thunder low and slow like a warning drum. Inside, students whispered, "That's him," as Leon walked by. By the end of the day, a local reporter named Samantha Blake had called the principal's office asking for comment on the viral math custodian. Elaine Porter declined politely. Harkins, however, didn't. He gave a quote that would later haunt him. He got lucky. "It's a publicity stunt. He's not a real mathematician." The article went online that night. Within hours, the headline spread, "Custodian challenges teacher solves calculus problem instantly." The comments section split like a courtroom. Some defended Harkins, most didn't. One user wrote, "You can't fake intelligence like that." Another, "I had this man clean my classroom after tutoring sessions. He used to check our math answers and never said a word." Leon read the article at midnight, sitting at his small kitchen table with a cup of black coffee gone cold. He sighed. So much for quiet life. The next morning, the parking lot buzzed with news crews. Students lined up for interviews. Harkins tried to hide in the faculty lounge, muttering that social media ruined education. But something deeper than embarrassment was at work. The district superintendent had scheduled an emergency meeting. They wanted answers. Elaine Porter called Leon again. "The board wants to see you this afternoon," she said. "You can decline if you'd prefer." "I'll go," he replied. "Are you sure? It's political now." Leon looked out the window, at the football field glistening after rain. "Math is math, ma'am. Politics can't change the truth of a number." At 4 p.m., he entered the conference room. The superintendent wasn't there yet, only Harkins and a few administrators. The tension was electric. Harkins leaned back, feigning nonchalance. "Guess you're famous now." Leon took a seat. "I didn't ask for that." "Yeah, well, fame's a tricky thing. People start expecting more than you can give." Leon looked up. "You worried I'll give too much?" Before Harkins could answer, the door opened. Superintendent Dr. Margaret Cole walked in, brisk and focused. "Gentlemen," she said, "let's settle this quickly." She turned to Leon. "Mr. Graves, you solved a calculus problem during school hours?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I was challenged publicly." "And you have prior study in mathematics?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "We verified your transcript. Georgia Tech, mechanical engineering major, 3 years completed, left due to family circumstances. Is that correct?" "Yes." Pam Harkins shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, with respect, this isn't about credentials, it's about protocol. He shouldn't have interrupted my class." Cole fixed him with a stare that could break glass. "From what I saw on video, you invited him to the board, Mr. Harkins." The room went silent. "I believe in classrooms where everyone is respected," she continued. "And I see none of that in how you addressed him." Leon spoke quietly. "I'm not looking to replace anyone, I just want to work in peace." Cole's tone softened. "Mr. Graves, what you did has inspired thousands of students online. We've had requests for you to tutor, even speak at math clubs." Leon blinked. "Ma'am, I'm a custodian, I clean floors." She smiled faintly. "And sometimes the cleanest floors reflect the brightest minds." Harkins looked away, jaw tight. The meeting adjourned with no decision, but everyone knew something had shifted. Leon walked out into late afternoon sun, tired but lighter somehow. He hadn't fought for recognition. He'd just refused to shrink. That night, Jordan Ellis uploaded part 2 of his video, Leon explaining derivatives to curious classmates during lunch. Caption: "He teaches better than the teacher." The post reached 500,000 views overnight. By the third day, local TV picked up the story. The segment opened with slow footage of Leon pushing his mop down the hallway, students waving as he passed. Voiceover: "At Grayfield High, brilliance wears blue coveralls." Leon didn't see himself as brilliant. He saw himself as someone who'd run out of chances and found peace in quiet labor. But peace has a way of ending when truth demands the floor. Friday morning, as he unlocked the janitor's closet, he heard the loudspeaker crackle. "Leon Graves, please report to the auditorium." He frowned. The custodian's name had never echoed through that PA system before. When he stepped inside, the entire senior class was waiting. Jordan stood near the stage holding a microphone, grin wide. "Mr. Graves," he said, "we wanted to thank you." Applause erupted, not mocking, but real. Leon froze in the doorway, heart thudding, unsure whether to stay or leave. Jordan continued, "We figured if you can teach calculus better than our teacher, you should at least have the chalk for one day." He held out a marker. Leon hesitated. "I'm no teacher." "You are now," Jordan said. "At least to us." Harkins stood at the back of the room, arms folded, face unreadable. Principal Porter whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. Leon walked slowly toward the stage. He took the marker, turned to the board, and began to write not equations this time, but a sentence. "The measure of intelligence is not what you know, but how you treat those who don't." The room fell silent. He looked at the students. Math taught me logic, he said softly. Life taught me empathy. One without the other is chaos. Somewhere in the back, a student whispered. That's deep. Harkins shifted, finally speaking. All right, everyone, that's enough hero worship. Back to class. But his voice had lost its command. The applause drowned him out. Leon left quietly afterward. He still had floors to mop, restrooms to clean, trash bins to empty. But as he pushed the cart down the hall, students nodded, smiled, thanked him. For the first time in years, he felt visible. That night, when the school emptied and the corridors fell silent, Leon paused outside room 214. The equation he'd solved still faintly marked the whiteboard. He picked up an eraser and stopped halfway. Then he smiled and left it there, proof that respect could exist alongside chalk dust. What Leon didn't know was that Harkins had already filed a complaint with the district, claiming the viral attention was disrupting academic order. And what Harkins didn't know was that the district had already begun investigating him. By Monday morning, the storm had grown teeth. Reporters waited outside the gates of Grayfield High, microphones pointed at passing buses. What had begun as a 30-second video had become a national talking point, the janitor who outsmarted his boss. Leon arrived early, hoping to slip through unnoticed, but the moment he stepped from his pickup, camera flashes erupted. He kept his head down, toolbox in hand, and murmured good morning to the security guard. The man nodded respectfully, but even his eyes carried that look, the one that mixed admiration with curiosity, as if wondering how a custodian could rattle an entire district. Inside, the corridors buzzed. Students whispered his name in clusters between lockers. That's him. He's trending again. He was on Good Morning America's clip segment. Leon moved through it like a man wading through fog. Every greeting felt heavier than the mop he usually carried. When he reached the janitorial closet, Henry Cole, his older coworker with a gray beard and slow humor, was waiting. You went and broke the internet, brother, Henry said, chuckling softly. I've been here 22 years and nobody ever cared who mopped these floors till you pulled calculus out of your sleeve. Leon sighed. Wasn't trying to pull anything. Yeah, well, you pulled pride out of the rug too. Look around, kids walk a little taller now. Before Leon could answer, the intercom cracked. Mr. Harkins, please report to the principal's office. Henry raised an eyebrow. That can't be good. Down the hall, Brian Harkins walked fast, face flushed. Over the weekend, his inbox had exploded with messages, some supportive, most scathing. Alumni called him arrogant. Parents demanded explanations. The district PR director advised him to control the narrative. Instead, he stewed in humiliation. When he entered Principal Porter's office, Elaine motioned for him to sit. Brian, this situation has spiraled, she said. We're under scrutiny. The superintendent wants cooperation, not defensiveness. I didn't do anything wrong, he snapped. I tried to engage the custodian. The internet twisted. Elaine leaned forward. Engage or embarrass? He met her stare, jaw tight. You're taking his side now? I'm taking the school's reputation seriously, she replied. You made it personal, and now it's public. Before he could argue, the door opened. Leon stood there holding a maintenance clipboard. Sorry to interrupt, ma'am, he said. I was told to check the vent in here. Elaine nodded. Go ahead, Leon. Harkins's eyes burned into him. Convenient timing. Leon ignored. Ew. He climbed onto a small stepladder, working quietly while the room filled with the awkward hum of silence. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, the man cleaning the air above them while tension thickened below. After Leon left, Elaine exhaled. Brian, I need you to take a few personal days. You're suspending me? Calling it what you like. Won't change what it is. HR will contact you. He slammed the door on his way out. By lunchtime, rumors of Harkins's suspension spread faster than any announcement. Some students cheered. Others felt sorry for him. But one thing was certain. The school had a new center of gravity, and his name was Leon Graves. Jordan Ellis found him mopping the cafeteria. Mr. Graves, Channel 8 News wants to interview you. They said you're a symbol of perseverance. Leon shook his head. Symbols don't clean gum off tables, Jordan. But people are saying you should teach. They're starting a petition. Leon's grip tightened on the mop handle. Petitions don't fix people's pride. Let's focus on lunch cleanup. Jordan hesitated, then left, filming a quick update for his followers. Within minutes, Teach Leon trended regionally. That evening, Leon sat on his porch, listening to the creak of cicadas. His phone buzzed endlessly, but he ignored it until one message from an unknown number caught his eye. It's Dr. Ernest Wilkins. Long time. Saw you on TV. Proud of you, son. Leon blinked hard. Dr. Wilkins had been his mentor 25 years ago, the night school professor who'd taught him to love calculus when he was juggling 3 jobs. He hadn't heard from him since before his mother died. The message pulled him backward through memory chalkboards. Late nights, the old man's voice sang, "You've got the mind of a theorist, Leon, but the heart of a servant. Don't lose either." He typed back slowly, "Good to hear from you, Doc. Guess life found a strange way of revisiting old lessons." The reply came quick. "You were never meant to stay invisible." Leon stared at the words until the porch light flickered. The next morning, the superintendent herself arrived. Dr. Margaret Cole walked the halls flanked by administrators and reporters. Cameras trailed discreetly. Leon ducked into a side corridor, not eager to be in the spectacle, but Cole found him anyway. "Mr. Graves," she called. "Do you have a moment?" He turned. "Yes, ma'am. I'm visiting classrooms. I'd like to see the environment you work in daily." He hesitated. "It's just halls and floors, ma'am." She smiled faintly. "Then show me what the rest of us overlook." As they walked, she asked about the students, about the teachers, about maintenance needs. Leon answered plainly, honestly. When they passed a group of kids doing algebra homework on the floor, Cole asked, "Would you help them?" Leon knelt beside them without hesitation, explaining slope in clear, simple language. Within minutes, the students were nodding, understanding. Cole watched quietly, arms folded. Afterward, she said, "I'd like to offer you something unconventional. We're creating an evening math support program. Would you consider leading it?" Leon blinked. "I'm not certified." "Maybe not officially," she said, "but clearly qualified. We'll handle credentials later." He opened his mouth to refuse, but her tone left no room for modesty. Think about it. By Thursday, the staff room had split into camps. Some admired Leon's humility, others felt threatened. One teacher muttered, "If he's the new standard, what does that make us?" At lunch, Harkins returned unannounced to collect his things. The silence as he walked through the cafeteria was thick. Leon was wiping tables near the exit when their eyes met. "Enjoy your fame," Harkins said under his breath. "It won't last." Leon simply replied, "Neither will bitterness." Students nearby heard it and murmured approval. Harkins's ears burned as he walked out, reporters waiting at the doors. That evening, the district released a statement. Grayfield High will launch an after-hours math initiative led by staff volunteer Leon Graves, supported by certified faculty. The announcement sparked both celebration and outrage online. Some praised the move as progressive. Others accused the district of virtue signaling. Leon ignored all of it. He spent the next day ordering supplies, dry erase markers, notebooks, erasers using his own modest savings. Henry Cole tried to stop him. "You're not paid for this, Leon." "I wasn't paid to be humiliated either," Leon said quietly. But here we are. The first night of the program drew 30 students. They filled the library tables, phones out, notebooks open. Leon began simply, "Math isn't about numbers. It's about patterns, and patterns tell stories. You just have to listen." They did. For 2 hours, the custodian taught derivatives, integrals, and patience. When the last bell rang, applause filled the library. But outside those walls, resentment brewed. A small group of faculty gathered at a bar that night. Words like unqualified, embarrassment, and precedent were tossed around. One voice carried most of the venom Brian Harkins's. "He's undermining us," he said. "And Cole's eating it up." A younger teacher asked, "So what are you going to do?" Harkins smiled thinly. expose him for what he is, a fraud with a mop. By morning, an anonymous email had been sent to the local paper claiming Leon had falsified his academic record. The reporter, smelling scandal, contacted the district before verifying. The headline went live before noon. Questions arise about viral Custodian's education claim. Within hours, the comment sections turned. So he lied? Another fake hero. Knew it was too good to be true. Leon saw the article while cleaning the faculty lounge. His stomach sank. He called Dr. Wilkins immediately. "Doc, they're saying I faked my records." Wilkins sighed. "That's nonsense. I still have your transcripts and letters from tech. Send me the contact info, I'll clear it." But damage travels faster than truth. By afternoon, students were whispering again, but this time the tone had changed. Jordan approached him, worried. "Mr. Graves, people online are saying you made up the Georgia Tech thing." Leon nodded slowly. "Let them talk. Facts outlast noise." That night he returned home exhausted. The porch light buzzed faintly. For the first time he felt the sting of humiliation, not because strangers doubted him, but because he'd given the world a reason to expect better from it. The next morning, Cole's assistant called. "The superintendent wants you at the district office today. Bring any proof you have of your education." Leon gathered a thin folder, copies of transcripts, an old student ID, and a worn recommendation letter signed by Dr. Ernest Wilkins, dated March 21, 2001. He ironed his shirt, polished his shoes, and drove in silence. When he entered the conference room, Harkins was already there, sitting beside a legal representative. Cole sat at the head of the table. "Mr. Graves," she said, "thank you for coming. There's been a complaint alleging false credentials. Before we proceed, do you wish to respond?" Leon placed the folder on the table. "I don't wish to argue, ma'am. I'll let the papers speak." Cole opened the folder, scanning quickly. Harkins leaned forward, trying to glimpse. "Georgia Institute of Technology, Mechanical Engineering verified transcript," Cole read. Aloud. "Professor Wilkins, recommendation attached." She closed it slowly, eyes on Harkins. Whoever filed that complaint either didn't check their facts or didn't care about them. Harkins's mouth opened, then shut. Cole continued. "Mr. Graves, I apologize on behalf of the district. We'll issue a retraction." Leon nodded. "No harm done." "Actually," Cole said, "considerable harm was attempted. Do you wish to pursue disciplinary action?" He shook his head. "No, just want peace." "Peace," she repeated softly. "Something this system rarely offers to men like you." As Leon left, Cole turned to Harkins. "We'll discuss your future later. For now, leave the premises." That afternoon, a new article appeared. Records confirm math custodian's education. Viral hero cleared of allegations. Public opinion flipped again, fiercer this time. The humiliation had boomeranged not onto Leon, but onto those who'd tried to bury him. At school, students erupted in applause when he walked in. Jordan filmed the moment. They tried to drag him down. He rose higher. Leon smiled faintly. "Let's keep the floors clean, not the gossip." That evening, a handwritten note appeared in his locker. No signature, just a single line. "I'm sorry. BH." He didn't need to guess the initials. He folded it once, tucked it into his wallet, and said quietly to no one, "Apology accepted, lesson learned." But the lesson wasn't just his. The district had seen how fast dignity could be weaponized and how easily truth could defend itself. Cole began drafting new staff conduct policies. Principal Porter started weekly ethics discussions. Students formed a peer tutoring club named the Graves Circle, motto, "Knowledge has no uniform." And Leon, still clocking in every morning at 7 sharp, never once called himself a teacher. He just kept showing up, mop in one hand, marker in the other. Yet deep down he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the middle, the moment before vindication becomes transformation. By the following week, Grayfield High had become something it had never been before, a national headline with hallways. News vans still camped outside, the gym parking lot filled with satellite dishes. Teachers tried to pretend life was normal. but the hum of curiosity never left the air. Even the students who once ignored Leon now treated him like a living riddle that refused to be solved. Leon moved through it quietly, head low, broom steady. Fame had turned his workplace into a spotlight, and spotlights, he knew, always burned hottest just before they faded. He kept telling himself this would all calm down soon, that people would forget, but the world had a strange way of remembering those who refused to play small. Inside room 214, the board still carried faint traces of chalk from that first dare. Principal Porter had asked to leave it untouched, a reminder of what respect looked like when no one expected it. Yet for Leon, it wasn't a monument. It was a scar he cleaned around every morning. That Monday afternoon, as he finished wiping tables in the library, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Graves, please report to the auditorium." The voice wasn't Porter's. It was deeper measured, unfamiliar. He set down his rag, washed his hands, and made his way across the courtyard. Students followed at a distance, whispering theories. When he stepped inside, he froze. The stage. Lights were on, and at the center stood Dr. Margaret Cole, the superintendent, microphone in hand. "Mr. Leon Graves," she announced. "Please join us." Applause rose, hesitant at first, then warm. Leon blinked, confused. Cole gestured him forward. "We didn't call you here for discipline," she said gently. "We called you here for demonstration." Behind her, a projector flickered to life. The screen displayed a clip grainy footage from 15 years earlier. Leon in his 20s, wearing a lab coat, scribbling equations in a college lecture hall. His voice came faint through tinny audio. "The integral of e to the x is e to the x plus c." The crowd gasped. Jordan Ellis, standing near the stage, mouthed, "That's you." Cole turned to the audience. "This footage was recently recovered from Georgia Tech's archives. It confirms what Mr. Graves never boasted about, that he was once a peer tutor in their advanced mathematics program. He left before graduation to care for his terminally ill mother. He never reapplied. He never asked for credit. He just kept learning." The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. Leon's throat tightened. He hadn't known those tapes still existed. Cole continued, "In every generation we meet people whose humility hides their brilliance. Mr. Graves reminded us that talent doesn't vanish when opportunity does. It waits." Students stood, clapping louder now. Leon raised a hand awkwardly, more to quiet them than to bask in it. He wanted to disappear, not be canonized. When the noise finally softened, he leaned toward Cole. "Ma'am, with respect, I didn't ask for this." She nodded. "I know, but sometimes stories ask for us." Afterward, the district's public relations team tried to escort him for interviews. Leon politely declined. He walked out the side door into the afternoon wind and kept walking until he reached the football bleachers, empty except for a single figure sitting near the top row, Dr. Ernest Wilkins. Older, thinner, cane resting by his knee. "Told you the world would find you again," Wilkins said, voice gravelly but proud. Leon climbed the steps slowly. "Didn't think it'd be through algebra." Wilkins chuckled. "Truth has funny doorways." They sat together, the stadium stretching quiet around them. "You know," Wilkins said, "I kept every one of your assignments. The only student who ever corrected my own equation and proved it." Leon smiled faintly. "And you still passed me." He opened his mouth to refuse, but her tone left no room for modesty. Think about it. By Thursday, the staff room had split into camps. Some admired Leon's humility, others felt threatened. One teacher muttered, "If he's the new standard, what does that make us?" At lunch, Harkins returned unannounced to collect his things. The silence as he walked through the cafeteria was thick. Leon was wiping tables near the exit when their eyes met. "Enjoy your fame," Harkins said under his breath. "It won't last." Leon simply replied, "Neither will bitterness." Students nearby heard it and murmured approval. Harkins's ears burned as he walked out, reporters waiting at the doors. That evening, the district released a statement. Grayfield High will launch an after-hours math initiative led by staff volunteer Leon Graves, supported by certified faculty. The announcement sparked both celebration and outrage online. Some praised the move as progressive. Others accused the district of virtue signaling. Leon ignored all of it. He spent the next day ordering supplies, dry erase markers, notebooks, erasers using his own modest savings. Henry Cole tried to stop him. "You're not paid for this, Leon." "I wasn't paid to be humiliated either," Leon said quietly. But here we are. The first night of the program drew 30 students. They filled the library tables, phones out, notebooks open. Leon began simply, "Math isn't about numbers. It's about patterns, and patterns tell stories. You just have to listen." They did. For 2 hours, the custodian taught derivatives, integrals, and patience. When the last bell rang, applause filled the library. But outside those walls, resentment brewed. A small group of faculty gathered at a bar that night. Words like unqualified, embarrassment, and precedent were tossed around. One voice carried most of the venom Brian Harkins's. "He's undermining us," he said. "And Cole's eating it up," a younger teacher asked. "So what are you going to do?" Harkins smiled thinly. "Expose him for what he is, a fraud with a mop." By morning, an anonymous email had been sent to the local paper claiming Leon had falsified his academic record. The reporter, smelling scandal, contacted the district before verifying. The headline went live before noon. Questions arise about viral custodian's education claim. Within hours, the comment sections turned. "So he lied? Another fake hero. Knew it was too good to be true." Leon saw the article while cleaning the faculty lounge. His stomach sank. He called Dr. Wilkins immediately. "Doc, they're saying I faked my records." Wilkins sighed. "That's nonsense. I still have your transcripts and letters from tech. Send me the contact info, I'll clear it." But damage travels faster than truth. By afternoon, students were whispering again, but this time the tone had changed. Jordan approached him worried. "Mr. Graves, people online are saying you made up the Georgia Tech thing." Leon nodded slowly. "Let them talk. Facts outlast noise." That night he returned home exhausted. The porch light buzzed faintly. For the first time he felt the sting of humiliation, not because strangers doubted him, but because he'd given the world a reason to expect better from it. The next morning, Cole's assistant called. "The superintendent wants you at the district office today. Bring any proof you have of your education." Leon gathered a thin folder, copies of transcripts, an old student ID, and a worn recommendation letter signed by Dr. Ernest Wilkins, dated March 21, 2001. He ironed his shirt, polished his shoes, and drove in silence. When he entered the conference room, Harkins was already there, sitting beside a legal representative. Cole sat at the head of the table. "Mr. Graves," she said, "thank you for coming. There's been a complaint alleging false credentials. Before we proceed, do you wish to respond?" Leon placed the folder on the table. "I don't wish to argue, ma'am. I'll let the papers speak." Cole opened the folder, scanning quickly. Harkins leaned forward, trying to glimpse. "Georgia Institute of Technology, Mechanical Engineering verified transcript," Cole read. Aloud. "Professor Wilkins, recommendation attached." She closed it slowly, eyes on Harkins. Whoever filed that complaint either didn't check their facts or didn't care about them. Harkins's mouth opened, then shut. Cole continued. "Mr. Graves, I apologize on behalf of the district. We'll issue a retraction." Leon nodded. "No harm done." "Actually," Cole said, "considerable harm was attempted. Do you wish to pursue disciplinary action?" He shook his head. "No, just want peace." "Peace," she repeated softly. "Something this system rarely offers to men like you." As Leon left, Cole turned to Harkins. "We'll discuss your future later. For now, leave the premises." That afternoon, a new article appeared. Records confirm math custodian's education. Viral hero cleared of allegations. Public opinion flipped again, fiercer this time. The humiliation had boomeranged not onto Leon, but onto those who'd tried to bury him. At school, students erupted in applause when he walked in. Jordan filmed the moment. They tried to drag him down. He rose higher. Leon smiled faintly. Let's keep the floors clean, not the gossip. That evening, a handwritten note appeared in his locker. No signature, just a single line. I'm sorry. BH. He didn't need to guess the initials. He folded it once, tucked it into his wallet, and said quietly to no one, apology accepted, lesson learned. But the lesson wasn't just his. The district had seen how fast dignity could be weaponized and how easily truth could defend itself. Cole began drafting new staff conduct policies. Principal Porter started weekly ethics discussions. Students formed a peer tutoring club named the Grave Circle, motto, knowledge has no uniform. And Leon, still clocking in every morning at 7 sharp, never once called himself a teacher. He just kept showing up, mop in one hand, marker in the other. Yet deep down he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the middle, the moment before vindication becomes transformation. By the following week, Grayfield High had become something it had never been before, a national headline with hallways. News vans still camped outside, the gym parking lot filled with satellite dishes. Teachers tried to pretend life was normal, but the hum of curiosity never left the air. Even the students who once ignored Leon now treated him like a living riddle that refused to be solved. Leon moved through it quietly, head low, broom steady. Fame had turned his workplace into a spotlight, and spotlights, he knew, always burned hottest just before they faded. He kept telling himself this would all calm down soon, that people would forget, but the world had a strange way of remembering those who refused to play small. Inside room 214, the board still carried faint traces of chalk from that first dare. Principal Porter had asked to leave it untouched, a reminder of what respect looked like when no one expected it. Yet for Leon, it wasn't a monument. It was a scar he cleaned around every morning. That Monday afternoon, as he finished wiping tables in the library, the intercom buzzed. Mr. Graves, please report to the auditorium. The voice wasn't Porter's. It was deeper, measured, unfamiliar. He set down his rag, washed his hands, and made his way across the courtyard. Students followed at a distance, whispering theories. When he stepped inside, he froze. The stage. Lights were on, and at the center stood Dr. Margaret Cole, the superintendent, microphone in hand. Mr. Leon Graves, she announced. Please join us. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then warm. Leon blinked, confused. Cole gestured him forward. We didn't call you here for discipline, she said gently. We called you here for demonstration. Behind her, a projector flickered to life. The screen displayed a clip grainy footage from 15 years earlier. Leon in his 20s, wearing a lab coat, scribbling equations in a college lecture hall. His voice came faint through tinny audio. The integral of e to the x is e to the x plus c. The crowd gasped. Jordan Ellis, standing near the stage, mouthed, That's you. Cole turned to the audience. This footage was recently recovered from Georgia Tech's archives. It confirms what Mr. Graves never boasted about, that he was once a peer tutor in their advanced mathematics program. He left before graduation to care for his terminally ill mother. He never reapplied. He never asked for credit. He just kept learning. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. Leon's throat tightened. He hadn't known those tapes still existed. Cole continued, In every generation we meet people whose humility hides their brilliance. Mr. Graves reminded us that talent doesn't vanish when opportunity does. It waits. Students stood, clapping louder now. Leon raised a hand awkwardly, more to quiet them than to bask in it. He wanted to disappear, not be canonized. When the noise finally softened, he leaned toward Cole. Ma'am, with respect, I didn't ask for this. She nodded. I know, but sometimes stories ask for us. Afterward, the district's public relations team tried to escort him for interviews. Leon politely declined. He walked out the side door into the afternoon wind and kept walking until he reached the football bleachers, empty except for a single figure sitting near the top row, Dr. Ernest Wilkins. Older, thinner, cane resting by his knee. Told you the world would find you again, Wilkins said, voice gravelly but proud. Leon climbed the steps slowly. Didn't think it'd be through algebra. Wilkins chuckled. Truth has funny doorways. They sat together, the stadium stretching quiet around them. You know, Wilkins said, I kept every one of your assignments. The only student who ever corrected my own equation and proved it. Leon smiled faintly. And you still passed me. Yet he never stopped studying. On weekends, he checked out math journals from the public library. He built homemade chalkboards from plywood scraps in his garage, covering them with formulas until his hands blistered. He solved problems no one had assigned him, sometimes tearing pages out in frustration when his mind outran his patience. Numbers were the only conversation that never judged him. He kept a small photo of his mother taped above his workbench. Under it, her handwriting from an old birthday card, "Keep your mind sharp and your heart kind." That sentence became his compass. One summer evening around 2006, a teacher at Grayfield spotted Leon scribbling equations on a break-room napkin. Didn't know custodians liked calculus, she joked. Leon smiled politely. Didn't know teachers assumed they didn't. The teacher laughed it off, but Leon heard the echo of disbelief. That was the night he decided that humility didn't mean invisibility. It meant patience until the right moment arrived. 15 years later, that moment came disguised as humiliation in a math classroom, the dare that set everything in motion. But between those years lived countless small acts no camera ever caught. He mentored students who lingered after detention, fixing vending machines while explaining algebraic fractions. He repaired computers in the tech lab and left tutorial notes under keyboards, unsigned. When teachers praised anonymous help, he just nodded. He didn't need credit. He needed purpose. One winter, a new vice principal, Calvin Reed, noticed that exam scores improved mysteriously after Leon's shifts. You got a secret tutoring business I should know about? He teased. Leon grinned. Just cleaning up messes, some physical, some numerical. Calvin grew to respect him deeply, often saying, if humility were a degree, you'd have tenure. Then, in 2023, the school budget tightened. Maintenance hours were cut, and rumors swirled that Grayfield might outsource custodial work to save costs. Leon didn't protest. If my time's up, it's up, he told Henry Cole. But fate, stubborn as always, had other plans. That was the same semester the district hired Brian Harkins, the teacher, whose pride would collide with Leon's patience. The two men met briefly in the hallway before the infamous day. Harkins had dropped a stack of worksheets. Leon bent to help. Thanks, Harkins said, not looking up. I'll handle it. Leon smiled, handed him the pile, and walked away. It wasn't hostility, it was hierarchy, the kind that existed unspoken in schools everywhere. When Harkins later mocked him, in front of the class, Leon saw not cruelty but blindness, the kind of arrogance born from never having to question your own place. And though he felt the sting, he also felt something else, a door cracking open after decades of silence. For once, the equation included him. Now, in the quiet that followed fame, he thought back to his mother's last conversation. She'd asked what scared him most about the future. Failing, he'd said. Failing to be enough. She smiled weakly. Then redefine enough. He'd done it, though not how either of them imagined. Each day he walked into Grayfield High, broom in hand, he carried that redefinition like a promise proof that knowledge kept alive in silence still counts. Late one night, months after the scandal cleared, Leon returned to his garage. The plywood board was still there, chalk dust coating its surface. He erased the clutter of old equations and wrote a single line across the top. Purpose, knowledge, compassion. He stared at it for a long time, then added beneath, Mom was right. The following week he invited Calvin Reed over for coffee. Thinking of something crazy, he said. An adult ed math class on weekends. No tuition, just community learning. People who never got the chance to finish school. Calvin smiled. You'll need a space. I'll use the cafeteria. Floors are already clean. Word spread quietly, the way good things often do. The first Saturday brought only 4 adults, 2 bus drivers, a retired nurse, and a teenage single father trying to pass his GED. Leon began with the same words he'd used with high schoolers. Math isn't about numbers, it's about patterns. By the third weekend, there were 12 students. By the sixth, 23. Someone donated whiteboards, someone else brought coffee. The local paper ran a small headline: Custodian teaches night math, no grades, just growth. That article reached Dr. Wilkins again. He called. You finally built your own classroom. Maybe, Leon said. Just without walls. By summer, his class had moved to the public library. He named it the Clara Project after his mother. Its mission statement, handwritten on a poster by the door, read, Education belongs to everyone who still hungers for it. When Cole visited the opening session, she stood in the back, watching him explain exponential growth using paper cups stacked like pyramids. No lecturing, no jargon, just warmth. She whispered to Porter, That's not a teacher. That's a reform in motion. But the most remarkable moment came weeks later when a small envelope arrived in the mail. The return address bore Georgia Tech's crest. Inside was a single page. Notification of degree completion. Attached was a note from Dr. Wilkins, now emeritus faculty. The board reviewed your credits, work history, and community contributions. Consider this an honorary degree earned not in classrooms but in life. Leon read it twice, then set it down beside his mother's photograph. Guess I finally graduated, he murmured. That night, he returned to Grayfield High alone. The halls glowed under dim custodial lights. He walked past room 214 and paused. On the board, someone had written in chalk, Thank you for seeing us. Class of 2024. He smiled, erased half the sentence, and added, Keep seeing yourselves. When he left, the janitor's keychain jingled softly, a sound that once meant duty, now sounded like purpose. Outside, dawn bled across the horizon. The parking lot shimmered with dew. Leon stood for a moment, breathing in the quiet. For the first time since 1997, he didn't feel like he was behind on anything. He was exactly on time. For a while, the noise quieted, but quiet is never the same thing as peace. Grayfield High kept running, bells ringing, lockers slamming, but beneath the routine, a new tension pulsed, invisible yet constant. Fame had changed. The ecosystem. Some teachers now measured their worth against a janitor with a chalkboard. Some students treated every class like a chance to film another revelation. The story that had begun as pride and patience had become a mirror, and not everyone liked what they saw staring back. Leon noticed it in the small ways first. The smiles that came with a hint of calculation, the meetings he was accidentally left out of, the polite silence that followed whenever he entered the teacher's lounge. It didn't anger him, it saddened him. He had never wanted to stand above anyone, only beside them. But celebrity, even the reluctant kind, builds walls where bridges used to be. The community math sessions at the library had outgrown the room. On the 5th Saturday, he arrived to find 50 people waiting, chairs spilling into the hallway. We might need to move to the auditorium, Calvin Reed joked. Leon smiled, but the joke was truer than either of them realized. The district had begun advertising the Clara Project on social media. Donations trickled in, then poured. Parents from neighboring counties drove miles just to sit in those informal classes. Leon taught the same way he cleaned, methodically, gently, until everything shone, yet success has its own gravity. Within weeks, the superintendent's office was flooded with questions from neighboring schools. Could they copy the program? Could Leon train other custodians to teach? Was he available for motivational talks? Cole handled most of it, shielding him when she could. You've become an idea, Leon, she told him one evening. Ideas attract both light and shadow. The shadow came from inside. A few senior faculty members sent a formal complaint to the board, claiming the attention on a non-credentialed staff member was undermining professional morale. The phrase looked harmless on paper but sounded like a noose in conversation. Cole called Leon into her office. "We'll handle it," she said. "You keep teaching." He nodded, though part of him wondered how many battles one quiet man was meant to fight. Then the media found the rift. Headlines shifted tone. Hero, or headache? District split over custodian turned teacher. The same cameras that once praised now demanded conflict. Reporters cornered teachers in parking lots asking if they felt threatened. They called Leon's humility calculated, his silence strategy. He stopped answering his phone. One evening, leaving the school long after dark, he saw someone had scrawled on the sidewalk in chalk, "Stay in your lane." He stood there a long time, rain beginning to fall until the words blurred into colorless streaks. He bent, wiped the rest away with his rag, and whispered, "Already did. You just moved the lines." When he got home, the porch light was still on. A letter sat under the door, official envelope, district seal. Inside, a notice of reassignment. Effective immediately, Leon Graves was to serve as instructional support specialist for the county's new math equity initiative. It was a promotion disguised as exile. He would no longer work daily at Grayfield High. The rationale: to expand impact beyond one site. The truth: to calm unrest by moving the cause of it elsewhere. He read it twice, then called Henry Cole. "They're moving me," he said. Henry whistled softly. "When a tree grows too tall, somebody always says it's blocking the view." Leon chuckled. "Then maybe it's time to plant another." He accepted the post quietly. His last morning at Grayfield felt like déjà vu, the same gray light through the windows, the same hum of fluorescent bulbs, but this time the students lined the hallways, holding notebooks like banners. Jordan Ellis stepped forward, shaking his hand. "You changed how we see people, Mr. Graves. Don't let them bury that under paperwork." Leon smiled. "They can file papers. They can't file hearts." At the district headquarters, the atmosphere was different. Polished floors, guarded smiles, meetings that smelled of politics. Leon was given a small office with a metal desk and a plaque that read, "Mathematics Outreach Coordinator." "It's progress," Calvin Reed told him. "You've got a voice now." Leon looked at the plaque and thought, funny how every title starts to sound like a cage if you listen too long. Still, he worked. He designed simple curricula, trained volunteers, coordinated weekend programs. The results were immediate. Test scores rose, dropout rates fell, but praise turned to pressure. State officials wanted data, not stories. "We need measurable outcomes," they said. Leon replied, "You can't quantify the moment someone stops being afraid of learning." They wrote that down anyway, because even poetry looks good in a report. Months passed. The noise faded again, replaced by steady progress. Then came the night that tested everything. A storm had knocked out power across half the county. Leon drove to a community center where one of his night classes met, carrying flashlights and extra notebooks. Inside, a dozen students waited in the dim light, some parents, some teenagers, all tired but eager. "We can cancel," one woman said. Leon shook his head. "The math still works in the dark." He drew shapes with a flashlight beam on the wall, explaining geometry through shadow. Laughter filled the room. Someone filmed it on their phone. The next morning, the clip went viral. "Even a blackout can't stop this teacher," the state education board noticed. Within a week, Cole received an invitation for Leon to speak at the National Educators Summit in Washington. She called him immediately. "Pack a suit," she said. "You're about to represent every unseen educator in America." He laughed softly. "And here I thought I just fixed leaky pipes." At the summit, under chandeliers and microphones, he felt more nervous than he ever had facing Harkins's class. Hundreds of administrators filled the ballroom. When his name was announced, he walked to the podium, took a breath, and said simply, "I don't have a PowerPoint, just a question. When did we decide that the only people allowed to teach are the ones who never stopped being students on paper?" The room stilled. If knowledge is power, then humility is its voltage. You cut that and the lights go out for everyone. The speech lasted 7 minutes. The applause lasted longer. The clip aired on national news that night. Grayfield High. Students watched from the library, cheering. Harkins, now teaching adult education in another district, watched too, whispering, "He earned it." But even triumph carries weight. The attention brought offers universities inviting him to lecture, nonprofits offering sponsorships. He declined them all. "I'm not chasing ladders," he told Cole. "I'm repairing steps." She smiled. "Then keep your hammer ready." Back home, life settled into a rhythm. Every morning he still woke before dawn, brewed black coffee, packed a lunch, and left a note for himself on the fridge. Stay small enough to listen, big enough to lift. The Clara Project grew into a statewide program. The governor honored him quietly at a civic dinner. He returned home the same night, folded the certificate, and used it as a bookmark in one of his mother's old novels. And yet, beneath all the success, a quiet ache lingered, the simple desire for normalcy, for anonymity, for the peace that comes when nobody's watching. One evening, walking through the now renovated halls of Grayfield High, he paused by the trophy case. Among plaques, for football championships and science fairs, a new one gleamed, Leon Graves for proving every mind matters. He smiled, touched the glass, and whispered, "Mom, we made it, strange but true." The fallout had finally settled into legacy. What began as humiliation had turned to revelation, and revelation to reform. The school, the district, even the state had changed, not because a man solved an equation, but because he solved a pattern of assumption that had gone unchecked for generations. Outside, the night air smelled of rain again. Leon looked up at the streetlight flickering above the parking lot, its glow steadying after each blink, and thought, that's how learning works too. A little flicker, then light. He started his truck, the radio low, jazz humming the same tune it had years before. Tomorrow would bring new floors to polish, new minds to reach, and somewhere between the two he would keep finding himself. It started quietly, with an email no one expected to matter. Subject line, follow-up inquiry, Educational Equity Grant Review. At first it looked routine, state auditors requesting data from every district that had received funding for new outreach programs. But inside the fine print hid one sentence that would set off months of scrutiny. All programs tied to unaccredited instruction must undergo compliance review. That single line pointed straight to the Clara Project and therefore to Leon Graves. Superintendent Dr. Margaret Cole read it twice before forwarding it to Leon with a short note. Don't panic. Bureaucracy moves slower than thought. But, by week's end, the words state investigation had already found their way into headlines. Reporters framed it as controversy. Columnists called it poetic irony, the man who brought reform now under review for defying structure. Leon didn't flinch. Let them check, he told Cole. I keep everything clean, classrooms, floors, and paperwork. Still, the investigation drew vultures. Talk show pundits debated whether inspiration without credentials was a liability. He's a good story, one commentator said, but good stories aren't policy. Leon turned off the television halfway through. They're right, he murmured. Stories aren't policy. They're reminders. Within days, state auditors arrived at the district office, 3 of them, gray suits and polite smiles that never reached their eyes. They requested attendance sheets, budgets, and curriculum samples. Leon provided them all, neatly labeled in color-coded folders. Everything's transparent, he said. You'll find no secrets here. One auditor, a woman named Angela Morris, paused mid-review. You designed these lesson plans yourself? Yes, ma'am. They're remarkably clear, she admitted. Better than half the certified materials I've seen. Leon smiled faintly. Clarity's cheaper than confusion, but not everyone in the building shared her admiration. A few administrators whispered that the district should suspend the program until the audit ended. It's safer, they said. Cole refused. We don't suspend integrity because paperwork's slow, she told them. We'll cooperate, not retreat. Weeks stretched into months. Every few days, Leon fielded new requests, documentation of every volunteer hour, every donated dollar. He answered calmly, sometimes late into the night, coffee cooling beside his keyboard. Henry Cole dropped by once, shaking his head. "They're trying to find dirt in a man made of soap." Leon chuckled. "Let them dig. They'll just hit. Clean floor." Despite his composure, exhaustion crept in. Teaching by day, compliance by night, he felt time folding around him. The joy that once filled the library sessions began to dim under the fluorescent light of scrutiny. He started dismissing classes earlier, apologizing to students. "I have reports to file," he'd say. They always nodded, but their disappointment hung in the air like chalk dust. Then, one afternoon, Angela Morris returned alone. "Mr. Graves," she said quietly, "off the record, I think this review's political. You're embarrassing people who've spent decades doing less with more." Leon sighed. "Then I'll keep embarrassing them politely." Her smile was brief, but genuine. "For what it's worth, your paperwork's flawless, but they'll dig anyway." True to her warning, the next phase began, a verification audit expanding beyond his program into his personal history. Employment records, tax forms, even his old custodial evaluations. It was supposed to be standard, but everyone knew better. They were looking for contradiction, any hint of impropriety that could justify folding the Clara project quietly into bureaucracy. Cole called an emergency board meeting. "This is no longer review, it's harassment," she said. Some board members shifted uneasily. "The state has authority," one replied. "Refusal looks like guilt." Cole shot back. "So does submission when you're innocent." Leon listened in silence. When the meeting ended, he said softly, "Let them finish. Truth doesn't bruise easy." But he felt the weight now. Every morning, the news cycle carried fresh commentary. Custodian turned teacher faces credential probe. Online, opinions split again, some defending him fiercely, others sneering that humility had been performance all along. Jordan Ellis, now a college freshman studying journalism, wrote a viral op-ed titled, "You Can Audit Paperwork, Not Purpose." It trended for a day before being buried under newer outrage. Then came the surprise witness, Brian Harkins. Months. After resigning, he resurfaced at a public hearing, invited by a state committee. His statement began stiff, formal. "My name is Brian Harkins. I taught mathematics at Grayfield High for 5 years. I was present at the initial incident involving Mr. Graves." Cameras flashed. Leon sat calmly a few rows back, expression unreadable. Harkins continued. "I made mistakes that day. Pride, prejudice, call it what you want. But I've watched what he's built since, and I can tell you this. The only thing fraudulent about Leon Graves is how little credit he takes." The room went still. Even Cole blinked. Harkins looked directly at the committee. "You're auditing the wrong man. Audit the system that made you think people like him needed your permission to matter." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Reporters captured it instantly. By evening, his quote led every broadcast. The following morning, the tone shifted. Editorials flipped sides. Headlines read, "Former rival defends custodian educator investigation under fire." Public support surged again, donations doubling overnight. The state office, once confident, now found itself cornered by optics it couldn't spin. Within a week, the audit was officially closed due to insufficient findings. Off the record, Angela Morris sent Leon a single line. "Told you bureaucracy moves slower than truth." Cole announced the closure at a press conference flanked by faculty and students. "This isn't just vindication," she said. "It's validation that integrity stands up under any microscope." Reporters asked Leon for comment. He replied, "I'm not relieved, I'm reminded. You can polish the floor all day, but someone will still check for dust. Do it anyway." The investigation ended, but its ripple reshaped the district. Policies were rewritten. Community educators could now earn accelerated certification through demonstrated skill. The Clara project became an official partnership program across 4 counties. Leon's quiet rebellion had evolved into institutional change, yet even victory carries fatigue. After the press conference, Leon slipped away unnoticed, walking to the edge of the football field behind Grayfield High. The bleachers were empty, the same place he'd once sat with Dr. Wilkins. He whispered into the wind, "You were right. Again, Doc. Patterns repeat until someone decides to solve them." The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and bruised purple. He thought about his mother, about the chalkboard in his garage, about the janitor's keys that still hung from his belt even though he hadn't needed them in months. They jingled softly, a small reminder of where every story begins. That night, he visited Wilkins's grave in Atlanta, the first time since the professor's passing a few weeks earlier. The headstone read simply, "Teacher, forever learning." Leon placed a folded note at its base. Investigation closed, lesson ongoing. By dawn, the news cycle had already moved on to other scandals, newer stories. Fame is fickle, but legacy lingers where headlines can't reach. Leon returned home, brewed coffee, and opened his notebook. On a blank page, he wrote a single sentence. For the next class, "Every equation needs balance, so does justice." At the next Saturday session, he began by telling his students, "They looked for flaws and found fingerprints, mine, yours, everyone's who ever dared to care. That's not failure, that's proof we're human." Laughter broke the tension. They dove into lesson 3 of algebra, pencils scratching rhythmically like rain. After class, a little girl waiting by the door approached him shyly. "My mama says you got in trouble for teaching." Leon knelt. "Did she now?" "Yeah, but she also said you didn't stop." He smiled. "That's because math doesn't stop, sweetheart. And neither do we." She nodded solemnly, handed him a drawing, stick figures in front of a blackboard. Above them, in crayon letters, "Mr. Graves helps people count hope." That night, he taped it next to his mother's photo in the garage. Beneath both, he scribbled in pencil, "Investigation complete. Purpose verified." Outside, the rain started again, soft and steady, rinsing away another layer of dust from the story that refused to fade. And as thunder rolled somewhere distant, Leon leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, whispering the same phrase he'd said the first time he touched chalk at Georgia Tech decades earlier. It all adds up eventually. The investigation had ended on paper, but its echo lingered in every corridor of the district office. The file might have been stamped closed, yet in the minds of administrators it still whispered one unsettling question. What happens when a man, without credentials, forces an entire system to look in the mirror? For Leon Graves, that question became impossible to avoid. Within weeks, the state board invited him to present his findings about the Clara project at their quarterly session in Atlanta. It sounded like an honor, but the invitation read more like a summons. Provide a summary of program structure, outcomes, and accountability metrics. Bureaucratic phrasing for prove yourself again, Cole warned him. They'll smile first, she said. Then they'll test how much backbone humility really has. Leon nodded. Then we'll see whose math holds. The hearing took place in a windowless chamber smelling faintly of paper and politics. Long oak table, microphones blinking red, rows of faces arranged like judges of a forgotten ritual. Leon wore the same gray suit he'd borrowed months earlier, the one Porter had pressed herself. He carried no notes, just a folder with attendance, sheets, and a worn photograph of his mother tucked inside. The chairwoman, Dr. Elaine Carver, opened briskly. "Mr. Graves, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your cooperation." Her tone suggested anything but gratitude. "You've achieved extraordinary community engagement," she continued, "but concerns remain about sustainability and governance. Before this program expands statewide, we must ensure it aligns with certified educational standards." Leon smiled faintly. "Ma'am, if certified standards had reached everyone, the Clara project wouldn't exist." A ripple moved through the room. Carver adjusted her glasses. "Let's stay on topic." "I am on topic," Leon said calmly. "The topic is who gets to decide when learning counts," the board murmured. One member, Dr. Harold Dean, leaned forward. "Mr. Graves, we're not questioning your sincerity. But we can't allow precedent that anyone with enthusiasm can teach complex material. It invites inconsistency. Leon met his gaze. Then certify consistency and compassion. First, skill follows. Cole, seated behind him, almost smiled. She'd seen him patient, humble, kind, but this was new. This was precision without apology. The questioning dragged on for hours. They dissected his budget, his volunteer roster, even attendance demographics. Leon answered each point with quiet accuracy, turning spreadsheets into stories. When asked how he measured success, he replied, "By the number of people who stop saying, 'I can't.'" When pressed for metrics, he said, "Confidence has no decimal point, sir." Laughter rippled through the audience. Even a few board members couldn't hide their amusement. Still, Carver pressed harder. "You've built a following that extends beyond this district. Some see that as inspirational. Others see it as destabilizing. Are you aware of the influence you now wield?" Leon paused. "If influence means reminding people they're capable, then yes, ma'am. Guilty as charged." That line made the evening news before the meeting even adjourned. But the most pivotal moment came near the end when a younger board analyst projected a slide comparing student improvement under the Clara project to statewide averages. The difference was staggering: 43% increase in comprehension scores among participants. Dean frowned. "Is that accurate?" The analyst nodded. "Double-checked twice." Carver's tone softened, if only slightly. "Mr. Graves, what's your secret?" "No secret," he said. "Just time. The one thing most people stop giving after they earn a title." Silence spread through the chamber like a held breath. Carver closed her binder. "We'll deliberate and notify you of our decision." Leon stood. "Thank you for your time, ma'am. For what it's worth, the kids I teach already decided weeks ago." When he walked out, cameras waited. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Graves, do you think you changed their minds today?" He smiled. "I wasn't trying to change minds. I was trying to open them." That night, news segments replayed his testimony under captions like, "Custodian confronts education, bored with grace." Social media flooded again with clips and quotes. But behind the applause, the board's deliberations stretched into uneasy silence. Days turned into 2 weeks. Cole fielded constant calls from journalists demanding updates. "They're nervous," she told him. "Half want to make you a spokesperson, half want to make you disappear." Leon shrugged. "That's balance." Then, on a Wednesday morning, the decision arrived. The board released a 20-page statement authorizing the Clara project as an official state pilot program funded, replicated, and directed under Leon's guidance. But the last paragraph caught him off guard. "Effective immediately, Mr. Leon Graves is hereby granted a provisional educator's license in recognition of exceptional demonstrated ability and contribution to public learning." He read it twice, then handed it to Cole. "So they made it official." She smiled. Justice always does math in its own time. The following day, the district held a press conference. Cole spoke first, summarizing the outcome. Then she stepped aside. "Mr. Graves, your turn." He approached the microphone, looking out over a sea of cameras and faces. "They call this a victory," he said, "but it's really an admission that potential doesn't need permission." Applause thundered, but he raised a hand for quiet. "If this story teaches anything, let it be that education doesn't trickle down from podiums. It grows from the ground up, wherever someone still cares enough to learn." Later, as crowds dispersed, Leon found a quiet corner backstage. He pulled out the photograph of his mother, edges worn soft from years in his wallet. "Guess your boy finally got a certificate," he whispered. "But it's your signature that made it real." Over the next months, the Clara project expanded statewide. Community centers, once empty on weekends, buzzed with activity. Retired teachers volunteered. Local businesses donated supplies. Each site hung a small framed motto at the entrance: "Knowledge has no uniform." Leon visited every new class, shaking hands, answering questions, insisting he was no celebrity, just a man lucky enough to prove what should have been obvious. Still, success never erased humility. He refused offers to move into administration. "My office has always been wherever someone needs help understanding," he told Cole. So he kept the same pickup, the same routine, the same coffee mug stained from years of use. One evening, the governor invited him to a televised education forum. During a panel discussion, a host asked, "Mr. Graves, after all this recognition, what's next?" He thought for a moment. "Next is making sure no one else has to go through what I did just to be believed." The audience rose in applause. Cole, watching from the front row, felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope that policy might finally follow principle. But even amidst the triumph, Leon remained grounded. Back home, he still volunteered to clean classrooms after events. Students teased him gently. "You don't have to do that anymore." He'd grin. "That's the secret. You never stop doing the work that got you here." On the anniversary of his mother's death, he returned to the small cemetery outside his hometown. He brought two things: a piece of chalk and his educator's certificate. Kneeling by her grave, he traced a simple equation on the stone: work x love, legacy. Then he whispered, "Solved." The next morning, news outlets reported the board's formal endorsement, the governor's praise, the viral clips of his speech, but none of them captured the real confrontation, the quiet one between ego and endurance, fought not in chambers, but in a man's conscience. Leon had faced not just a system, but the temptation to become what he once despised. He'd chosen humility, again, and that choice, steady, deliberate, became the truest reform of all. As autumn settled over Georgia, the first class of officially licensed Clara mentors graduated. They presented him a framed quote engraved beneath his name: "He didn't teach us to solve for X, he taught us to solve for ourselves." He hung it in the garage beside his mother's photograph. That night, he sat under the same flickering bulb, writing future lesson plans in neat rows. Between formulas, he added one final note: "If every confrontation ends in understanding, then no fight is wasted." Outside, the world moved on new policies, new faces, new stories. But somewhere, in the hum of a late-night classroom, a child still learning long division looked up and asked, "Who's Leon Graves?" And a teacher smiled and said, "Just a man who refused to stop learning." Recognition doesn't arrive like thunder. It creeps in softly, through letters, through stories, through strangers who see their own reflection in your struggle. For Leon Graves, it began with one envelope on a Wednesday morning, postmarked from Washington, D.C., sealed with an embossed crest of the Department of Education. He almost threw it away, mistaking it for another audit, but curiosity won. Inside was a formal letter. "Mr. Graves, you have been nominated for the Presidential Medal of Education for extraordinary service in advancing accessible learning." He read it twice, once out loud, once silently. Then he set it on the kitchen table beside his half-finished coffee and whispered, "Mom, they're at it again." News spread faster than he could process. Television anchors replayed clips from his earlier speeches. Newspapers reprinted the photo of him wiping a whiteboard while students applauded. For a week, Grayfield felt like the center of the country. Every journalist wanted a quote. Every talk show wanted an appearance. Leon declined most politely. "Teaching's louder than talking," he told them. But one invitation he couldn't refuse came from the National Education Forum in Chicago. The theme that year: rebuilding trust in public schools. The keynote slot was his. Superintendent Cole called him the night before. "Remember, this isn't about you," she said. "I know," he replied. It never was. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was overwhelming. Hundreds of educators, reformers, and policymakers rose to their feet. Leon waited for the noise to settle, then leaned toward the microphone. "I came here to talk about what happens after recognition," he began, "because applause fades faster than chalk dust." He told them about Grayfield, how the janitor's closet became a classroom, how doubt became fuel, how bureaucracy almost strangled innovation until compassion revived it. He never once mentioned his award. He ended simply, Every time you judge who belongs in a classroom, remember that learning was here before any of us. It will be here long after. The room stood again, but this time in silence before clapping a moment of reverence instead of spectacle. Afterward, people lined up to shake his hand. One woman, an older teacher with trembling fingers, said, "You reminded me why I started 30 years ago." Another whispered, "My students needed you. Now I can be you." Leon listened, humbled and slightly overwhelmed. Back in Georgia, his absence was felt. The Clara Project centers ran smoothly, but everyone missed his quiet presence. Jordan Ellis, now interning at a major newspaper, returned home for spring break to visit him. "You're famous now," Jordan joked. "There's a hashtag named after you." Leon chuckled. "That sounds exhausting." "It is for the internet," Jordan said. "Not for you." They sat on the bleachers, the same ones where Leon had once met Dr. Wilkins. "You know," Jordan said softly, "you didn't just teach math. You made people look up again." Leon nodded. "Then maybe we both passed the test." A week later, he flew to Washington for the award ceremony. The hall was grand, filled with politicians, journalists, and educators. When his name was called, he walked calmly to the stage. Cameras flashed, music swelled, and the Secretary of Education pinned the medal on his lapel. She whispered, "You remind us what classrooms were meant for." He whispered back, "Not medals." In his acceptance speech, he said only one sentence, "This belongs to everyone who was ever mistaken for less." It became the headline the next morning. After the ceremony, a group of university presidents approached him. They offered honorary doctorates, teaching fellowships, even endowed chairs. Leon thanked them kindly and turned them all down. "If I take that chair," he said, "who's left to mop the floor after class?" Back home, Grayfield High celebrated in its own way. The cafeteria staff baked a massive sheet cake that read, "Congratulations, Mr. Graves, our hero of homework." Students decorated hallways with math formulas and doodles of mops wearing graduation caps. Even the skeptical teachers, once wary of him, joined in. One of them, his old rival Brian Harkins, walked up to him during the celebration. "I owe you something," Harkins said quietly. Leon shook his head. "You owe yourself forgiveness." Harkins smiled faintly. "Maybe both." The two men shook hands. It wasn't dramatic, but everyone who saw it knew they were witnessing something far rarer than rivalry. It was redemption. Months passed. The medal hung on a nail in Leon's modest living room, beside his mother's photo and the child's drawing. That read, "Mr. Graves helps people count hope." He never polished it. "Dust means it's real," he'd say. But recognition had ripples beyond Grayfield. States across the South began adopting the Clara Project model. Libraries reopened, night classes. Retired custodians applied to become tutors. The idea that brilliance could come from anywhere was no longer a novelty, it was policy. Universities studied the phenomenon. Economists analyzed it. Politicians quoted him in speeches. But Leon stayed the same. Each morning he brewed his coffee, fed the stray cat that had adopted him, and left early to unlock classrooms. Doors should be open before sunrise, he liked to say. Then came the day that tested how deeply his message had rooted. A reporter called about a proposed budget cut that threatened the adult education program statewide. "We'd like your comment," she said. Leon frowned. "You're cutting what works?" "They say it's too expensive." He paused. Then maybe they forgot the cost of ignorance. The next morning he drove 3 hours to the state capitol without invitation. Cole met him there, surprised. "They're voting today," she said. "It's already decided." "Nothing's decided until people stop caring," Leon replied. He walked straight into the committee room mid-session. Legislators turned, startled. "Sir, this is a closed meeting." Leon nodded. "Then open it. Education should never happen behind closed doors." The chair hesitated, then gestured for him to speak. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. "You gave me a medal for teaching without a degree. Now you're taking away classrooms from people who still need their first chance. That's not budgeting, it's betrayal." He didn't read from notes. He just spoke from the same place his lessons came from the heart that had learned patience the hard way. When he finished, the room was silent. One representative wiped his eyes. Another whispered, "He's right." The motion to cut funding failed by a single vote. Cole met him outside afterward. "You just saved the program." Leon smiled. "No, they did. I just reminded them of the math." That speech circulated again like every word he spoke seemed destined to. But by now, Leon had stopped keeping track. He cared more about the next class, the next struggling student, the next equation to explain. Recognition had become background, noise to purpose. One evening, after another long day of teaching, he drove back through Grayfield, headlights glowing against the familiar school walls. A new mural covered the side of the gym, his silhouette with a mop in one hand and a marker in the other. Beneath it, bold letters read, "Learn, teach, repeat." He pulled over, stared at it for a long moment, then laughed softly. "I told them not to paint my face," he muttered. But deep down, he was touched. Later that night, sitting on his porch, he opened a letter from a woman in Oregon. "My husband lost his job. He started teaching math at a shelter after watching your interview. You don't know us, but you changed our lives." He folded it carefully, added it to a shoebox already full of similar letters, and whispered, "This is the real medal." The national recognition didn't make him richer or louder, it made him gentler. He'd seen how fragile respect could be, how easy it was for admiration to become envy, and how quickly sincerity could be twisted into spectacle. He guarded his humility like others guarded wealth. On the one-year anniversary of the Clara Project's expansion, the school board held a public event. Students from every center attended. They presented Leon with a simple plaque made of reclaimed wood. No gold trim, no glitter, just engraved words. "To the man who proved classrooms exist wherever. Curiosity meets kindness." He held it for a long time, then said quietly, "I never planned to start anything. I just refused to stop something worth finishing." As applause echoed through the gym, he looked up at the rafters where old championship banners hung. He thought of his mother again, of Wilkins, of the first day he'd been mocked in that math classroom. The humiliation had turned into a revolution, one written not in anger, but in chalk. When the crowd dispersed, Leon stayed behind, sweeping confetti from the floor. Calvin Reed walked in, shaking his head. "Still cleaning after your own parties?" Leon smiled. "Someone's got to close the loop." Calvin laughed. "You really don't change, do you? Why fix what's balanced?" Outside, dusk settled over Grayfield like a soft curtain. The parking lot lights flickered on. Somewhere, a student practiced calculus under a street lamp, using Leon's printed notes. Somewhere else, a janitor unlocked a classroom after hours, believing maybe, just maybe, his mind could reach farther than his mop. And Leon, watching from the steps, felt peace. True recognition, he realized, isn't fame, it's continuity. It's knowing the work will keep going long after your name fades from headlines. He whispered into the quiet. The math checks out. Change is a strange teacher. It gives the test first and the lesson afterward. For Leon Graves, the next test came not from applause or accusation, but from something quieter: responsibility. Recognition had turned into reform, and reform came with paperwork thicker than the textbooks he used to clean off desks. By the time the national spotlight dimmed, the Clara Project had grown far beyond Grayfield. There were now 53 community learning centers across the South, each following his model. No tuition, no hierarchy, just learning. Some met in church basements, some in fire halls, a few in converted laundromats. The curriculum was still written by hand, Leon's lessons, photocopied so many times that the ink looked tired but alive. He never asked for control, but people kept giving him authority he didn't want. He found himself in meetings with state commissioners and education lobbyists who spoke in circles and metrics. Scalability, frameworks, data alignment, words that polished purpose into policy. Leon listened politely, then said, "Let's just keep teaching people to read numbers before we turn them into statistics." They laughed, but not always kindly. At first, the reform was celebrated. Districts reported improved graduation rates, reduced dropout numbers, and a revival of community trust. But when funding cycles changed, so did the mood. Legislators began questioning why so much of the state's education budget flowed into a program that started with a janitor's mop bucket. The Clara Project's results are anecdotal, one senator claimed during a televised debate. We can't build a system around sentimentality. Leon watched the broadcast from his small kitchen, expression unreadable. Sentimentality, he murmured. Tell that to the kids passing algebra for the first time. Within months, a new oversight committee formed another polite name for resistance. They demanded standardization, licensing structures, and mandatory testing to align the Clara Project with statewide education metrics. Superintendent Margaret Cole called an emergency meeting with Leon and Calvin Reed. They're trying to box you in, she said bluntly. If they control the structure, they control the soul. Leon nodded. Then we'll remind them what souls are for. The next weeks felt like déjà vu, the same politics, the same meetings, the same quiet war between principle and procedure. Only now, Leon wasn't just defending himself. He was defending hundreds of teachers, volunteers, and students who had built their confidence inside those makeshift classrooms. The committee hearings were public this time. Television crews lined the hallways. As Leon entered, murmurs filled the room. Some saw him as a hero. Others saw him as a problem that wouldn't fade. Chairman Victor Langley, a career bureaucrat with a politician's smile, began with courtesy sharp enough to cut. Mr. Graves, you've done extraordinary work. No one denies that. But extraordinary work must fit ordinary rules. You understand? Leon clasped his hands calmly. Rules should fit people, not the other way around. Langley leaned back. That's poetic. Unfortunately, poetry doesn't balance budgets. Leon's tone stayed steady. Neither does ignorance. The audience gasped softly. Langley's smirk faltered. They questioned him for hours. How were instructors vetted? What metrics proved long-term retention? What mechanisms ensured equity? Leon answered every question, with the patience of a man who'd scrubbed more floors than they'd ever walked. We measure success by understanding, he said. If you want data, check the dropout lists, see whose names disappeared because they stopped giving up. When the hearing ended, cameras followed him into the hallway. A young reporter asked, Mr. Graves, do you ever get tired of fighting systems? He smiled. I'm not fighting, I'm tutoring. That quote made headlines again. The following morning, an op-ed in the Atlanta Tribune called him the custodian of change. The phrase stuck. But reform, like mathematics, demands balance. For every victory came a setback. Some local boards mismanaged funds. Others claimed the Clara Project diverted attention from traditional schools. Leon spent late nights drafting letters, clarifying procedures, defending the vision he never meant to lead. You build something too human, he told Cole one evening, and the system will try to make it mechanical. Cole nodded slowly. Then maybe our job is to keep it human as long as we can. They did. They held open forums, in gymnasiums, invited parents to watch lessons, trained volunteers to adapt to each community's needs. Slowly, the resistance softened. Even some of Langley's allies admitted privately that the Clara Project worked because it felt personal. You can't franchise sincerity, one lobbyist said. He'll ruin the textbook industry. When the next academic year began, the state implemented a compromise, the Clara curriculum, approved for use in public schools as a supplemental resource. Leon refused royalties. Knowledge isn't property, he said. It's light. You don't sell sunlight. The publishers hated him for that. The teachers loved him more. By winter, national networks were calling again. The Janitor Who Rebuilt Education became a documentary on PBS. Leon refused payment. He only asked that the closing credits include the names of every volunteer who ever taught a class. When the film aired, viewership shattered records. The camera captured him in his garage, still surrounded by chalkboards and coffee cups, still wearing that navy work shirt with his name embroidered in white thread. The Guan closing shot showed him cleaning a whiteboard after teaching, saying softly, "People think reform means replacing what's broken. Sometimes it means remembering what worked before we broke it." That sentence became a national talking point. Politicians quoted it in speeches, educators printed it on posters. But fame never diluted his simplicity. One day, a reporter found him repainting the hallway walls of Grayfield High. "Mr. Graves," she asked, "why are you still doing maintenance work?" He looked at the roller in his hand and said, "Because if the walls stay clean, maybe the ideas will stick." That was Leon, always practical, always poetic by accident. Yet reform on such scale invited new kinds of conflict. Private education companies saw the Clara project as competition. Lobbyists began pushing for privatization bills, arguing that free community learning devalued professional instruction. The debate turned ugly online. Anonymous posts mocked him, calling him Saint Janitor and accusing him of using humility as marketing. Leon ignored it, but Cole didn't. She confronted a state senator publicly, saying, "If humility threatens your system, maybe the system's the problem." The clip went viral. Cole received hate mail. Leon sent her flowers the next day. "You shouldn't have to mop the mess I make," he wrote in the card. She replied, "You built a flood, I'll bring buckets." Jordan eventually published his book, The Janitor Who Changed America. It became a national bestseller, required reading in teacher training programs. The final chapter contained Leon's last recorded words, written in his own hand. "If you spend your life cleaning up after others, you'll learn something they never will, the shape of humility. And if you ever get the chance, teach that shape to someone else." 10 years after his passing, the Clara project reached international recognition. Countries from South Africa to Japan adopted the model, calling it the Graves Framework. A statue was erected outside Grayfield High. Leon standing tall, mop in one hand, textbook in the other, gaze lifted toward the horizon. Beneath it, engraved in bronze, "Knowledge has no uniform." Visitors came from all over. Former students brought their children, pointing up at the statue and saying, "That's the man who proved kindness is intelligence in motion." Teachers left apples at the base. Custodians left folded rags. Scholars left handwritten equations on slips of paper, each one beginning with FX Muckern respect. Jordan, now older, visited every year. One evening he arrived at sunset, when the light made the statue's shadow stretch across the school lawn like a long path. He sat on a bench nearby, notebook on his lap, and whispered, "You're still teaching, Leon. Still teaching." As the sun dipped lower, a group of students gathered by the statue. They carried a small chalkboard and began writing equations, solving them together, laughing when they made mistakes. None of them had ever met Leon. None had lived through his time, but every one of them carried his lesson, and maybe that was the point. Legacies aren't built by fame or medals. They're built by habits that outlive their maker, the quiet persistence of people who keep learning, keep cleaning, keep caring. That night, as the last bell rang through the empty halls of Grayfield High, janitors began their rounds. Mops moved softly across polished floors. Chalk dust glimmered in the fading light. And somewhere in that rhythm, in that simple, eternal work, Leon's story kept breathing steady as ever, balanced as always. Because the truth of it all was simple, and he had said it once long ago. Math is just life written honestly. You get out what you put in. The pressure intensified until the Federal Education Secretary proposed something radical, a nationwide adaptation of the Clara model. The plan: integrate community mentorship programs into every district. They called it Project Access, with Leon as chief consultant. He hesitated. "You sure you want a custodian writing national policy?" The secretary smiled. "We want the man who made people believe again." So he agreed on one condition: that every policy include funding for maintenance, staff education benefits. "If schools sparkle, so should the people who keep them that way," he said. Congress approved it unanimously. The reform reached beyond classrooms. Enrollment in adult education doubled nationwide. Dropout recovery programs reopened. For the EU-wide first time in decades, standardized test disparities began to shrink. Journalists called it the Graves effect. Leon hated the name, but he couldn't deny the math it was working. Still, amidst the triumph, he stayed grounded in small details. Every Friday, he returned to Grayfield to sweep hallways. Students greeted him with hugs and calculus questions. Teachers waved from doorways. Once, a little boy stopped him and asked, "Mr. Graves, is it true you teach presidents?" Leon laughed. "No, son. I teach people. Some of them just happen to wear suits." When the first nationwide conference for the Clara model convened, Leon stood on stage beside the education secretary and Cole. Thousands of educators filled the auditorium. He looked out and said, "I never asked to reform anything. I just wanted to stop pretending intelligence wears uniforms. If that's reform, so be it." The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. But for Leon, the loudest applause was the quiet afterward, the sound of understanding settling in. The years that followed brought more honors, more headlines, more attempts to turn him into something marketable. He declined every endorsement. He lived in the same modest house, drove the same pickup. When interviewers asked why he hadn't cashed in, he'd reply, "Because you can't monetize peace of mind." Eventually, as his hair silvered, people began calling him Professor Graves, though his official title remained Program Director. He'd smile each time. "Titles are math tricks," he'd say. "They only mean something if both sides of the equation balance." One spring morning, Cole visited him at his house. She was nearing retirement, proud but tired. "You changed, more than you know," she said. Leon poured her coffee. "We changed it," he corrected. She shook her head. "No, Leon. You reminded us what change was supposed to feel like, uncomfortable but necessary." They talked for hours, remembering the early days, the mop bucket, the dare, the viral video that started it all. When she left, Leon stood on the porch watching her car disappear into the horizon. He thought of his mother, of Wilkins, of every student whose name he could still recall. He whispered, "The pattern holds." By the end of that decade, the Clara Project had become part of the national curriculum framework. Every public school had a mentorship track, every adult education center a custodial scholarship. Leon's original garage chalkboard hung in the Smithsonian under a plaque that read, "The equation that changed everything." He visited it once quietly after hours. A curator recognized him and offered a tour. He waved it off. "I just came to clean the glass." The reform was complete not because the system was perfect, but because the impossible had become ordinary. The janitor had become the teacher, and the teacher had become the movement. Outside the museum, dusk settled over the city. Leon stood by a reflecting pool, the lights shimmering on the water like equations written by the sky itself. He smiled and whispered, "Balance restored." Years passed. The world changed, as it always does, quietly at first, then all at once. The Clara Project became something larger than anyone imagined, a network, a movement, an ordinary miracle repeated in thousands of classrooms across the country. But for Leon Graves, change always felt small and steady, like the rhythm of a mop across tile floors or the scratch of chalk on a clean board. He grew older gracefully, his hair silver now, his back not as straight, but his eyes still sharp. He still lived in the same small house on the edge of Grayfield, the same porch where coffee steamed each dawn, the same gravel driveway where his old Chevy rested like an aging friend. To the world, he was a legend. To himself, he was still a custodian who loved math. He never called it retirement. He called it transition. "The floor doesn't stop being the floor just because you stop sweeping it," he told Cole during their last conversation before she stepped down from office. "It just waits for the next pair of hands." She laughed softly. "Then promise me you'll teach those hands before you rest." "I already am," he said. "They just don't know." Yet, when Cole retired, the state renamed its Teacher Mentorship Center after her, the Margaret Cole Institute for Public Learning. she requested that Leon give the dedication speech. Standing at the podium, he looked at her, then at the crowd, and said, "You can build schools out of stone, but the strongest ones are built from trust. She taught me that. She taught us all that." The audience stood as one, applause rolling like distant thunder. After that day, Leon stepped back from public view. He declined new interviews and refused any political appointment. The national press, bored by humility, eventually moved on to fresher headlines. Leon returned to what he loved: small classes, small towns, small miracles. He spent his final working years traveling from center to center, meeting local mentors, revising lesson plans, and sharing stories. He visited prisons that had adopted the Clara curriculum, where inmates proudly called themselves students. He helped open a women's shelter library in Mississippi, where mothers studied at night while their children slept beside them. He called those moments the quiet victories. Everywhere he went, someone recognized him. "Mr. Graves, you changed my life," they'd say. He always answered the same. "No, you did. I just handed you the chalk." In time, Jordan Ellis, the boy who'd first filmed the viral moment years ago, became a journalist known for stories that celebrated everyday heroes. He stayed in touch with Leon, visiting him once a year to talk about life, not fame. One autumn afternoon, sitting on the porch with the sound of cicadas humming, Jordan asked, "Do you ever miss the spotlight?" Leon smiled. "The spotlight's just another lamp, son. It burns hot and attracts moths. I prefer daylight. It belongs to everyone." Jordan nodded, scribbling the quote in his notebook. He didn't know it yet, but it would become the opening line of his first book, The Janitor Who Changed America. As the years rolled on, the impact of Leon's work deepened. Schools across the country built mentorship programs modeled after the Clara Project. Adult education enrollment reached record highs. Scholarships for custodial workers bore his name. In one generation, the line between who taught and who cleaned had blurred exactly as he hoped. Then one spring morning, the inevitable news came quietly, as all endings do. Leon Graves passed away peacefully at home, sitting at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee still warm beside him, a notebook open to a single unfinished equation. There was no drama, no struggle, just stillness. His neighbors said the radio was playing softly when they found him, a jazz tune he'd always loved. The announcement hit the nation like a pause between breaths. For days, social media flooded with tributes: students, teachers, janitors, governors, all posting the same words. We were all his students. News anchors spoke with reverence usually reserved for presidents. Documentaries replayed clips of him teaching with chalk-stained hands. Newspapers printed his quotes as if they were scripture. At Grayfield High, flags flew at half-mast. School auditorium filled with people, students, alumni, custodians from neighboring counties, even a few members of the education board who had once doubted him. On stage sat a simple display, his work shirt folded neatly, his mop leaning beside it, and a single piece of chalk resting on top of his old lesson notebook. Principal Porter, now long retired, spoke first. Leon Graves didn't just teach math. He taught grace, the kind that cleans rooms no one wants to enter and fixes problems no one else sees. He taught us that knowledge and kindness are just two sides of the same equation. Then Jordan spoke. "The first time I filmed him, I thought I was capturing a man solving calculus. Turns out he was solving us." There were no tears left by the end, only quiet awe. When the ceremony closed, students filed out past a bronze plaque newly mounted near room 214, the classroom where it all began. The inscription read, "In this room, respect learned to stand." In the following years, his legacy only grew. The National Graves Foundation funded scholarships for underprivileged adults returning to school. A university in Atlanta established the Leon Graves Center for Accessible Learning, offering degrees to those who'd once been locked out of education. And every May 12th, his birthday, schools across the nation held Open Door Day, inviting anyone from the community to teach something, anything, to anyone willing to learn. But what made Leon's legacy different wasn't the institutions or the programs. It was the ripple effect of humanity. Teachers spoke softer, students listened longer, Custodians walked taller. Every person who ever doubted their worth now had proof that brilliance could begin anywhere, even with a bucket and a broom.